Hallo Leute, welcome guys. So in this video we'll cover the important and difficult topic of German adjective endings. As you know, if you use an adjective in front of a noun, then you need to give it endings. My first tip is at least give the adjective an E, and in many cases that will be the correct ending. At least an E, but there could be a second letter, R, S, N, or M, any of these four letters. But at least an E, that's never wrong. If the adjective is not in front of the noun, then it doesn't get any endings, like Das Haus ist schön. As you know, in this case, no endings. So if you find this topic challenging, then don't miss any of these tips. Watch the video to the end. Let's start. So German adjective endings for beginners. A2 level. Also A1 and B1 students can watch, of course. So the full table looks kind of intimidating, right? You have the categories masculine nouns, feminine nouns, neutral nouns. That's the gender. We have 3 genders in German. And the fourth category is the plural category. Here the gender doesn't matter. Regardless of the gender, they'll all be the same. That's why we only have 4 categories. Otherwise, we would have gotten 6 categories, of course. So on the left-hand side, you get the case. As you know, we have 4 cases as well. The first one is nominative, second one is accusative, the third one is dative, and the last one we won't cover in detail in this video. That's the genitive. Let's take a look at the nominative case first. So I've chosen really easy words that every German learner knows, like der Mann, die Frau, das Kind, and for the plural, die Häuser, the man, the woman, the child, and the houses. And for the adjective, let's use the basic adjective schön, pretty, beautiful, nice. So you get der schöne Mann. That's the definite article. In the next row, you get the indefinite article, ein schöner Mann. So right away you can see one important thing. I always tell my students there is only one R, never 2. The R is either in the article or the R is in the adjective. If you use the definite article, the R is already here. Don't give it a second R in the adjective. If, however, you use the indefinite article, ein, there is no R in ein. Now we need the R in the adjective because we need 1. Never 0, never 2. We need 1 R in this case. So the first row is the definite article, second row is the indefinite article, and the third row, this one right here, schöner Mann, we won't cover this in detail in this video. That's the 0 article. It mostly also gets the signal ending. In this case, it's the R, schöner Mann. It's the same adjective form that you need as you use with the indefinite article. And the 0 article, this third row here, basically means that there is no article. It's kind of rare. If you haven't heard of it, that will be covered in the next video, in the part 2 of this video, I mean. Let's move on. Feminine, die schöne Frau, eine schöne Frau, schöne Frau. So here both words end in an E. And the signal is also the E. And we have it twice. Die schöne Frau, eine schöne Frau. So 2 R's, this never works. Only 1. That was the important rule for the masculine. But 2 E's, yeah, we need that. 2 E's, that's fine, but not 2 R's. For the neutral, again, never 2 S or 0 S, we need exactly 1. So the neutral and the masculine, they're kind of similar in this way. Das schöne Kind, ein schönes Kind, schönes Kind. So the signal ending is the S for the neutral, and there is always exactly 1. Das schöne Kind, here we have the S. Ein schönes Kind, here we have the S. So depending on the article that you use, you either have an S already, like in the case of das, then don't use a second S for the adjective. But in the second example, ein schönes Kind, this article word doesn't have an S. Now we need the S in the adjective. Exactly 1 S, never 0, never 2. All right, now for the plural, we get die schönen Häuser, and schöne Häuser. First of all, maybe you're wondering why we only have 2 entries here, because the other forms, masculine, feminine, neutral, we get 3 entries, 3 forms each. For this one, we only get 2 forms. The reason is, in the plural, there is no such thing as a plural indefinite article. So indefinite, ein schöner Mann, eine schöne Frau, ein schönes Kind, a beautiful man, a beautiful woman, a beautiful child. There is no such form in the plural. So we only have the definite article, die schönen Häuser, and we have the zero article. So we always, instead of the indefinite article, we use the zero article for the plural. I told you that the zero article is not important for you now on the A1, A2 level, with the exception of the plural. For the plural, it is important because we use it instead of the indefinite article, which doesn't exist for the plural. In other words, in the plural, the indefinite article and the zero article, they coincide. So for the plural, we get die schönen Häuser or schöne Häuser, the pretty houses or just pretty houses. And the rule I tell my students is, in the plural, if you use an article, we also need an N for the adjective. So if there's an article, we need an N. If there's no article, we don't need the N. So article, then there's an N. No article, then there is no N. Maybe it helps you to think of the plural forms as very greedy. You know, there is an article and it also wants an N, that's very greedy. Or very modest, like no article and no N, that's fine, I'm okay with that. Either greedy or modest. If you're serious about learning German, you should definitely check out my 27-hour-long Beginners A1 course. Join over 1,000 students that master the A1 German level with me. All details down below, it's the first link in the video description. So let's compare this now to the accusative forms, the next row. As you can see, not a whole lot changes. So people always worry about the accusative forms, but they're not too difficult, to be honest. If you've mastered the nominative forms, then the accusative forms are almost the same. The only forms that aren't the same are these forms, the accusative masculine. Here we get new forms. The other forms, the feminine, the same. The neutral is again exactly the same, and the plural is again exactly the same as the nominative. So going from the nominative to the accusative, don't change anything. Use the same forms that you would for the nominative, unless it's masculine accusative. And I know it's not always easy to know whether a noun is masculine. Don't worry too much about mistakes like this at the beginning. But if you know this is masculine, okay, I'm using a verb that requires the accusative case or a preposition that requires the accusative case, then we need different forms. So if we highlight the accusative forms now, you can see the new forms. And the new forms are, as you know, the masculine accusative. We get den schönen Mann for the definite article, einen schönen Mann for the indefinite article, and then for the zero article, the one that you probably won't need so much, again, schönen Mann. Just remove the indefinite article. So here, as you can see, the signal ending for the masculine accusative is the N. And the N we get twice. So the E we can get twice. We saw that previously for the feminine. And also the N we can get twice. Twice meaning once for the article, den, and once for the adjective schönen. What we cannot get twice is the R and the S. So den schönen Mann, einen schönen Mann, and schönen Mann. The other forms we don't have to go through again because they are the same as the nominative forms. So let's go back to our full scary table now. So let's take a look now at the dative forms. For the accusative forms, not a whole lot changed, only the masculine forms. But for the dative, it's a whole different story because here every single form changes. The dative masculine signal ending is the M. We have an M here in the article form. So dem schönen Mann, einem schönen Mann. And the M is another letter that we cannot have twice. Never two R's, never the letter S twice, and now the third rule, never the letter M twice. So it's dem for the article, and then the adjective needs an N. And I'll give you a great tip on the adjective endings for the dative in a minute. So dem schönen Mann, definite article, einem schönen Mann, indefinite article. Let's move on to the feminine. Der schönen Frau. So the signal ending for the dative feminine is the R. Der schönen Frau. Indefinite article, einer schönen Frau. So I mentioned that I will give you a tip for the adjective forms in the dative. We have the N again here. The masculine adjective endings, dative, they got an N. And the feminine adjective endings in the dative, they also got an N. Let's move on. The neutral, they also get an N. And the plural, they also get an N. So another great tip I always give my student is, if you have a dative form and you have an adjective in front of a noun, this adjective will get an N. Regardless of whether it's singular or plural, regardless of the gender, masculine, feminine, neutral, there is one little exception, and that's for the zero article. That's the rarest one. You probably don't even need that right now. But as long as you use an article, and you mostly will, 95% of the time, at least, if there's an article, then the dative adjectives, they always get an N. Dem schönen Mann, der schönen Frau, dem schönen Kind, den schönen Häusern. Always an N for the dative adjectives. So let's move on to the neutral dative forms. We have the M again as the signal ending. Dem schönen Kind. Einem schönen Kind. So the M we get for the masculine dative, but also for the neutral dative. And as you know, the M cannot come twice, and the second letter will be an N for the adjective, like all dative adjective endings. Lastly, for the plural, we get den schönen Häusern. That's the definite article. And for the indefinite article, which doesn't exist, so we have to use the other form, the zero article, we get schönen Häusern. Another great tip for the dative in the plural, I always tell my students, is in the dative plural, give all the forms that you have an N. So the article word gets an N, den. The adjective, if you have one, gets an N as well, like always, adjective forms in the dative case. But now something special, surprising happens. Even the noun gets an N. Den schönen Häusern. So 3 N's, up to 3 N's. The article form, the adjective words, and the nouns also get an N, unless the noun has already an N at the end, or an S. In this case, we wouldn't at the end, but most nouns, they get an N at the end. And that's kind of rare because the nouns we usually don't change. We usually change the forms in front of the nouns, adjectives, articles, but in this case, we also change the noun. We give it an N. So that's the third case done. Let's quickly take a look at the fourth case, and that's the genitive. Now, I'll only quickly read the forms, and also our example sentences coming up, they won't have genitive forms. That will be a topic we'll focus on for the part 2, for the intermediate advanced learners, B1, B2 learners. So for the masculine genitive, the signal ending is an S, des schönen Mannes. Feminine, der schönen Frau. Neutral, des schönen Kindes. Plural, der schönen Häuser. So just 2 quick things I want to point out. So for the masculine and the neutral, we have the same forms. We get an S as the signal ending. And something surprising happens. The noun changes again, which kind of rarely happens. We saw it for the dative plural, and now we also see it for the genitive masculine and the genitive neutral. Here, the article gets an N, but also the noun gets an N. Des schönen Mannes, des schönen Kindes. And for the feminine, we have an R as the signal ending, and for the plural, we also have an R for the signal ending. And the adjective, let's take a look again. they again get an N all the way, just like the dative adjectives. So the rule, we can extend the rule now. Dative adjectives as well as genitive adjectives, they always get an N as long as they're used with an article, which we will have most of the time. So let's switch back to the full table, the full scary looking table. And I want to remind you of the most important rules and tips and tricks again. The first tip was there is never two R's, only one, either here or here in the adjective. Same rule, there is never two S, either one S here or one S here, never two. The same, by the way, for the M, never two M's, either one M or one M here for the indefinite article. If you don't have an article for the zero article, then you need the M for the adjective. But zero article we cover in part 2. If you want me to do a part 2, if this was useful, then you can let me know down below in the comments, by the way. So never to R, never to S, never to M, only one. The second rule was double E. This is quite possible and necessary. Double E happens a lot. The same as double N. This also happens a lot. So double N, double E, yes. Double R, double S, double M, no. The second rule was that we, in the plural, if there is an article, we also need an N. If there is no article, then we don't even get the N. So the plural is either greedy, article and the N, or it's modest, no article and no N. The other tip was that for the accusative, all of these forms, they don't even change. So all of these, accusative, feminine, neutral, plural, they're the same as the nominative forms. They don't even change. And the last great tip was that for the dative adjective endings and the genitive adjective endings, you always get an N, regardless of which form you have. And the very last rule was, the very last tip rather, was for the dative plural, don't even think about it, give all the words an N, articles, adjectives and nouns. Up to 3 N's, or even 4 if there are 2 adjectives, or even 5 N's if there are 3 adjectives. Okay, now let's take a look at some example sentences. So the first example sentence is Ich kaufe einen roten Apfel. I'm buying a red apple. What have we got here? Well, kaufen, like most verbs, needs the accusative case, and Apfel is masculine. Always try to learn the nouns together with the article. That's the best practice. There's also a video on tips to know which article a word has. You can find the link down below in the comments. So since it's accusative masculine, we need to change it to N's. Ich kaufe einen roten Apfel. And one tip I gave you is that double N, yeah, this works. Double N and double E, this definitely works, but not double R, double S, double M. Okay, next example. Er trägt eine blaue Jacke. He's wearing a blue jacket. Tragen, to wear. Again, it's a verb that takes the accusative case, but this time we don't have a masculine noun, we have die Jacke. Like most nouns ending in E, it's feminine. So here, no need to change anything, it's the same as the nominative forms. Er trägt eine blaue Jacke. Wir haben einen kleinen Hund. Haben, you guessed it, also takes the accusative form. So we need einen kleinen Hund because, again, Hund is a masculine noun. Der Hund. We have a small dog. Wir haben einen kleinen Hund. Double N. Let's move on. Sie wohnt in einem schönen Haus. She lives in a beautiful house. So here we have, for the first time, the dative case. In is a two-way preposition. There'll be a video coming soon. If you want, then let me know in the comments. So it sometimes takes the accusative case for motion, if you're going somewhere, and for the position, it takes the dative case. Here we have the position. It's about living somewhere, not about traveling, going, moving, running, flying somewhere. So dative, sie wohnt in einem schönen Haus. Haus is a neutral form, das Haus, and the dative neutral the signal ending is an M. So in einem schönen Haus. Double M, this never works. And the rule was that for the dative and also genitive adjectives, we always get an N. So we get an N here in schönen. Sie wohnt in einem schönen Haus. Ich esse eine große Pizza. I'm eating a big pizza. Pizza is feminine. Die Pizza, it's accusative after essen, like most verbs, accusative. But here, feminine accusative, so it's the same as the nominative feminine forms. Double E. Ich esse eine große Pizza. Next sentence. The old man is reading a book. So here, lesen, to read, is again an accusative verb. So ein Buch, that's the accusative case. But since it's neutral, there is no change. It's the same as the nominative form. We have a second noun here, by the way. Der alte Mann. And this one has an adjective. So der alte Mann is the subject of the sentence. And the subject always means that we need the first case, the nominative case. Der alte Mann. Since it's a masculine noun, der Mann, we have an R in the article, but there cannot be a second R, you know that? So it's der alte Mann. A very common mistake is many people say der alter Mann, but double R, as you know now, never do it. Doesn't exist. Sie hat einen neuen Laptop gekauft. She bought a new laptop. So kaufen, you guessed it, like most verbs, to buy is an accusative verb, and laptop is masculine, so we have lots of N's again. Einen neuen. Well, two, not lots of N's, two N's. Sie kauft einen neuen Laptop. Das kleine Kind spielt im schönen Garten. The small child, the little child, is playing in the garden. We have two nouns with adjectives again. The first one is das Kind, and it's neutral, das Kind. And as you know, there is no second S, it doesn't exist. So, das kleine Kind spielt im schönen Garten. That's again dative, for the same reasons as we got in the last dative sentence. Im schönen Garten. Im is short for in dem, as you know. Here the preposition and the article, they contract to one word. So that's dative, we get the M, and we never get a second M. Adjectives, in the dative case, they get an N, so schönen. Das Kind spielt im schönen Garten. You see how it's not too terrible. With lots of practice and some tips and tricks, you can actually master the adjective endings, I promise you. Das ist ein gefährlicher Weg. That's a dangerous way or a dangerous path. It's der Weg, it's masculine, and in this case, after sein, you also get the nominative case. That's not an object, it's a nominative case here. Ein gefährlicher Weg. We don't have an R in the article, do we? It's the indefinite article ein, a dangerous way. There is no R there, so we need the R for the adjective. Ein gefährlicher Weg, a dangerous way. Er hat eine lustige Geschichte erzählt. He told a funny story. Erzählen, like most verbs, accusative. Geschichte, like most nouns ending in E, is feminine. Die Geschichte, so we get E's. Eine lustige Geschichte. It's feminine, accusative. Das kleine Kind lacht viel. The small child laughs a lot. Das Kind is, again, a neutral noun, and there cannot be a second S in this case, just an E. Das kleine Kind lacht viel. Er hat ein bequemes Sofa. He has a comfortable sofa, a comfortable couch. So, Sofa is neutral, das Sofa, so we need the S either in the article, but not here because we have the indefinite article, so then we need it for the adjective. Always one S and one R, never two and never zero. By the way, I always keep telling you always one, never two. If you get two adjectives, like a comfortable, expensive sofa, then you would get two S, of course. Ein bequemes teures Sofa. So this rule I always give you refers to the article and then the adjective. And mostly there's one adjective, but if there is a second or a third adjective, they always get the same endings. There's no reason why an adjective should get a different ending than the other one if they're in front of the same noun, if they're describing the same noun. But mostly we have one adjective. Sometimes we might have two. Der Film war sehr gut. The film was very good. Der gute Film, if we wanted to say it like that. Here the important thing is, people learn all of these endings and they struggle, of course, because it is a bit hard. And then they put endings where there shouldn't be any endings. Because here, der Film war sehr gut, the word gut, the adjective gut, is not in front of the noun. See? Der Film war sehr gut. In this case, the adjective doesn't get any endings, only if the adjective comes in front of a noun. I wanted to remind you of this important fact also. So, der gute Film, the good movie. Now we get an ending, but not if the adjective is not in front of the noun. In this case, no ending. And the next sentence is, der Besitzer des neuen Restaurants ist unsympathisch. The owner of the new restaurant is unfriendly. And here we have two adjectives again, but only one needs an ending. You know now why, because only one is in front of a noun. Der Besitzer des neuen Restaurants. Here we have das Restaurant. It's a neutral noun. And here for the first time I included a genitive form. This will be covered in more detail in the part 2. If you want me to, let me know down below. But here we need an S as the signal ending for this genitive, neutral genitive form. And never to S, the adjectives in the dative, but also genitive, like here, they always get an N. Adjectives in the dative and genitive case, they always get an N. So des neuen Restaurants. And the noun also gets an S. Restaurants. Der Besitzer des neuen Restaurants ist unsympathisch, is unfriendly. This adjective is not in front of a noun, so in this case, no ending at all. So I know it's a rather difficult and tricky topic. Don't give up. Watch this video twice or 3 times if you need to. Practice, and I'm sure you can master the German adjective endings. So don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one.